My name is Pip Nolan. I know a lot of you would have been expecting Matt Jones here today, but unfortunately he's a bit unwell. So we are here with me, and Deanne's online as well. So I'll give you a little brief overview of NZHSP. It started in 2016 as a LinkedIn group, which quickly gained a lot of traction. It grew from an online group to informal coffee catch-ups occurring all over New Zealand. It's now grown to a highly active Facebook group with close to 1,000 members and has become an incredible source of real and to-the-minute health and safety information, peer support and networking. Because let's face it, sometimes health and safety can be a very lonely profession. Last year in 2018, NZHSP ran an incredible conference with international speakers. So we had Deanne spoke at that as well, Tim Allred and Anthony Cerebolo, as well as a number of local talents. And this year, we are excited to be able to present another conference, but this one is going to be completely online and free as well, and that is happening on November the 5th. So if you haven't booked in for that, make sure you do, and there'll be a link at the end of this. So for that conference, we recently secured Naomi Kemp from the Australian Institute of Health and Safety, and we'll be making an announcement on our second keynote speaker within the next few days. We're excited to have a range of sponsors supporting both this event and the follow-on conference in November. So today's event is brought to you by Clever Medkits.
Workplaces can be dangerous. There's lots of ways to injure yourself, and chances of finding proper help can feel a bit like playing Russian roulette. For example, here I am talking to you while the whole time forgetting that my hand is on the grill. I go to the first aid box, only to find it's empty. It says it was restocked yesterday, but someone's gone and nicked everything, making this first aid box non-compliant with health and safety regulations. Or you're opening a box whilst listening to your wonderful co-worker Jenny talking about her amateur wrestling victory. So you go back to the same old first aid box, find it's a total shambles. How's Jenny gonna take your finger back on now? Or does this sound familiar? It's 1400 AD and you're under immense pressure to create a feast of divine proportions for the king and his new king baby. Unfortunately, in the heat of the moment, you add recently invented gunpowder to your weasel stew instead of the required pepper. Even though you're blinded, you manage to find the eye solution and flush out that hot, scalding oil. But due to a slow and underused health and safety paper system, your report gets lost, and the king has you locked in the dungeon. Well, all of that nonsense is a thing of the past. Introducing Clever Medkits. Clever Medkits are the smartest way to make sure your first aid boxes are stocked, compliant, and not costing you a small fortune. The sensor technology and cloud connectivity means that you have a record of every item that is accessed across all your locations, all at the touch of your fingertips. And when it's more than just a small boo-boo, your health and safety manager gets an instant notification. The kit even takes a photo so you know who was involved and what they took, all in real time. It automatically reorders and courier delivers stock so you don't need to worry, making your job simple and safe.
And we are super excited to have Deanne here with us today. Deanne has over 20 years experience in work health and safety, HR, org development and L&D. with expertise across a wide range of industries in the public, private, and not-for-profit sectors. Deanne is well known for her innovative approach to leadership through the application of neuroscience, psychology and mindfulness, and other transformational techniques. Deanne is an expert in building leadership and organizational capabilities, enabling individuals and organizations to achieve positive, productive, and sustainable change. So I don't know about you, but I am very, very excited to have Deanne with us today. So I'll pop right over onto Deanne and we will go from there.
Thank you, Pip, and thank you everyone for today. I know it's everyone's so busy in their day, so taking sort of even just an hour and a half out of your day can be really appreciated. And I hope that you learned something out of today's session that you can take back into the workplace, and that can help you as well with your not just safety. It's really all about employee engagement and any sort of conversations that we have in the workplace. So who am I? As Pip said, I'm the founder of Instinct Workplace Solutions, and I'm a neuroscience nerd. So I started my working life in the police as a police officer before moving to workplace health and safety and joining the inspectorate at what is now Safe Work New South Wales. Back then it was WorkCover New South Wales. But during my time in the police and at WorkCover, I attended way too many fatalities and serious injuries and knocked on way too many doors to tell families and their loved ones that they were either not coming home or were seriously injured and in hospital. I used to get so frustrated because so many times, in fact, most of the time, the incident could have been avoided, which I think most of us share that frustration. So for the last couple of years I was in the police, I spent most of those years in the crash investigation unit dealing with fatal and serious injury accidents. And I attended hundreds of accidents, actually probably thousands, because there was rarely a day that went by that we didn't attend at least one incident. When we investigated car accidents, we looked at three aspects: vehicle, environment, and driver. And on the very rare occasion would we find a mechanical fault or an environmental factor caused or contributed to the accident. The majority was caused by driver error because people make mistakes. The sad part was that often mistakes they made was something that many of us made, and probably were just lucky that it didn't result in an accident at the time. And that's not dissimilar to health and safety. And when I moved into WorkCover, going to fatalities and serious injuries there, same thing, like so many times it was human error. And I guess that's where I started getting inquisitive, working out, like, why do people do what they do? Why do we not think about what we do? And that's what led me to study psychology and then took me down into the neuroscience path as well. So after I left WorkCover, I was fortunate enough to take a role with Qantas, and I worked in the airline industry as their health and safety manager in a global role for a number of years, and then worked in mining and infrastructure with the APA Group for a number of years as well. So I was fortunate to, I guess, work in some really high-risk industries and have that experience across those. But unfortunately as well, with both of those jobs too, I again saw the same thing happening. So again, my journey continued, I guess, with studying psychology and neuroscience. And then when I started my own business, I really started to focus on why do people do what they do and try to develop programs around that. And it's really interesting because often some of the simplest things can be the best solution. And I think in safety, one of the things I've found over the years, we often try to overcomplicate things. And we look for the expensive, shiny solutions to things. We look at, different systems, processes, tools, what we can do. But quite often, or one of the things that I've found is the most effective way that we can actually change safety and change people's behaviour is through conversations. So conversations are key to our daily existence. But do we really give them the attention they deserve? When you think about it, how many conversations do you have each day? Do you ever stop to think about how a conversation went? Do you ever consider the impact of that conversation had on other people, the other person or other people? Do you give consideration to the attention that they deserve? We all engage in conversations every single day for many different reasons. They're the way we connect, engage, navigate, and transform the world. And they are critical for our individual and organisational success. So when was the last time you actually sat down and thought about your conversations? Sorry, people, I've just got people in the waiting room, so I'm just admitting them. It's popping up on my screen. I'm not sure if you're seeing it. It's all good. Um, so when was the last time you sat down and thought about your conversations, how they went, what worked, what didn't? Did it achieve the desired objectives? How did the conversation make the other person feel? And what could you have done to make that conversation more effective? I don't know about you, but I must admit that for many years I took the value of conversations for granted. And when I think back now to some of the conversations I had over the years, knowing what I know now, I realize how important they are. Gone are the days when conversations were simply a means of sharing information, telling people what to do or what not to do, or what's on our mind. Neurological and cognitive research tells us that conversations go much deeper than just information sharing. They are dynamic, interactive, and can have a significant impact on the way we connect, engage, interact, and influence others, which is really important from a safety perspective. Conversations are also one of the most accessible, powerful, and cost-effective tools that we have available to us in life and in business. And done well, they can transform individual and organizational performance because they can shift mindsets and shape reality, events, and outcomes in a positive and collaborative way. So why don't we give them the focus they deserve? Why don't we actually use them more as a tool to help engage with the workers in our workplaces or with others? In 2016, my passion for all things neuroscience actually led me to study a methodology called conversational intelligence. And it's a framework that shows us how conversations create powerful relationships and culture, and how by applying this framework, individuals and organizations can actually make significant changes and achieve extraordinary results in engagement, performance, and productivity. So the conversational intelligence is a methodology that was developed by a lady called Judith Blasser. And Judith's work in the CIQ framework really resonated with me because it's based on neuroscience. It's backed by scientific research and provides easy to understand techniques that we can all apply to any type of conversation. This, combined with recent findings in the field of cognitive neuroscience, which also provides us with fact-based, deeper understanding of how the brain works, how relationships are built and broken, the impact emotions have on how people think, react, and ultimately behave, and how we can better communicate with each other, can be used significantly to improve our workplace conversations. So I love this quote by Judith. Achieving greatness depends on the quality of the culture, which depends on the quality of relationships, which depends on the quality of conversations. Everything happens through conversation. Everything does happen through conversation, from ordering our morning coffee to interacting with our colleagues, engaging with customers or clients, delivering a sales pitch, conducting performance reviews with team members, facilitating a coaching conversation, engaging in a safety interaction with workers. The list goes on. In fact, there really aren't too many things that we do in life where we are interacting with other people that don't involve conversations. Yet again, we often take the value of them for granted, particularly in the workplace. Worse still, we often fail to recognise that every single conversation we have has an impact, and it's not always a positive one. And there lies the issue when it comes to building healthy, engaged, and high-performing individuals and organisations. Done right, conversations can create an environment that builds trust, support, innovation, and enhances relationships, leading to healthy, productive, high-performing individuals, teams, and organisations. Even if we're having difficult conversations, if it's a good one, we feel good about it because our trust network has been triggered. We feel connection to the other person and we feel we can trust them. So whilst we may not like the conversation or like the topic that the conversation is about, in a good conversation, we know exactly where we stand with others and we still feel safe. Done wrong, however, conversations can be damaging. They can create fear, conflict, and negativity, resulting in a resistance and a decline in performance because they trigger our threat response in our brain, which activates our distrust network. And when this is triggered, it has a much longer lasting effect, than if our trust network is triggered. Because when our distrust network is activated and we go into a threat response, high levels of cortisol, which is our stress hormone, are produced, sending us into the fight, flight, freeze response. So what causes a fight, flight, freeze response? When our threat circuitry, sorry, I'm just letting some more people in. When our threat circuitry is activated, a couple of key things happen in our brain. And this is because our brain still fundamentally operates on the same principles that it did back in our ancestors' days, when we were out in the field hunting and gathering for food. Our brain subconsciously looks for threats 5 times every second. So when it believes it's under threat or there's a potential for threat, it releases the cortisol and primes us to respond to that threat. Our prefrontal cortex, which sits at the front of our brain and is responsible for our executive thinking, our decision-making, processing information, it begins to shut down and activates our amygdala, which sits in the emotional part of our brain in the limbic system. When that happens, the blood drains from our prefrontal cortex and goes to our limbs because our body is priming ourselves to fight, flight, or freeze. When this happens, we literally can't think straight. We become more negative, defensive, sensitive, and we often perceive issues to be bigger than what they are, or start seeing issues that don't even exist. These effects can last for more than 26 hours because cortisol functions in a similar way to a sustained release tablet. And the more we think about what happened, the longer the impact lasts. Sorry, there's just a few people who have just come in through the waiting room that I've just let in. So welcome to the session. We're probably a couple of minutes into it, but I'm sure you'll catch up on where we're at anyway. So on the flip side of that, positive and engaging conversations, good conversations, trigger a production of oxytocin, which is the feel-good hormone. And that moves us into a reward state and increases our ability to communicate, collaborate, and trust. And when we're in a reward state, we do our best work. For this reason alone, we can see why the quality of conversations is so important. And it sounds so simple, but we still get it so wrong. Why are so many conversations in the workplace still so poor? Research actually tells us that 9 out of 10 conversations miss the mark. And this was a study conducted at Stanford University. And so in other words, what they're saying is 90% of the time, the thing that the person is trying to communicate to another person gets muddled in translation. And that thing that they're trying to communicate could be a piece of information, a direction, instruction, or an attitude. So again, if we look at it from a safety perspective, it might be some critical safety rule or message that we're trying to convey to people, but it's not actually getting through because we're not communicating in the right way. And so therefore, even though we think we've had the conversation with someone, 9 times out of 10, that's missing the mark. So that person is not actually taking that information in. So Judith Glasser actually conducted even further research on this, and she actually found that as many as 95% of verbal exchanges or conversations in the workplace are what we call telling conversations. It's where we tell people what to do and we don't ask them or we don't engage with them. And as human beings, we all hate to be told what to do. It's just, again, a natural default that we have that we don't like being told what to do. So using what we've learned from the field of neuroscience and by applying the principles of conversational intelligence, we can transform our conversations. We can enhance individual performance and strengthen the organisation's culture to achieve greater business results and significant improvements in employee engagement and safety performance. So what is conversational intelligence? Some of you may have heard of it before, but if you haven't, conversational intelligence, or CIQ, as it's often called, is it's a framework developed by Judith Glasser. And Judith was an American author, academic, business executive, and organisational anthropologist. Judith was an amazing lady, and I was fortunate enough to work with her in 2016 and 2017 when I sort of studied the conversational intelligence. And sadly, she passed away last year of pancreatic cancer. But she's left such a significant legacy, and the way they built the program. It's something that will continue on even though she's passed. But it's a powerful, hardwired, and learnable ability to connect, navigate, and grow with others, which is a necessity in building healthier, safer, and more resilient organisations. CIQ begins with trust and ends with high quality relationships and organisational success. And it's all based around conversations. So some insights from Judith that she shared with us along the journey when I actually trained with her was that conversational intelligence is a framework and perspective that lets us see how conversations create powerful links between relationships and culture. Conversations are the way that we engage, connect, navigate, and transform the world. And to get to the next level of greatness depends on our quality of our culture, again, which depends on the quality of our relationships, which depends on the quality of our conversations. Everything happens through conversations. Through decades of experience and studies around culture, Judith discovered that the heart of every great leader, and when I say leader, I don't mean that it has to be someone in a leadership role. We're all leaders in an organisation, regardless of what our title is. But the heart of every great leader, culture, and brand is the transformational power of effective conversation. Conversational intelligence helps us to recognise the dimensional nature of our conversation and helps us identify and access the right dimensions for each situation that we face. So with conversational intelligence, Judith identifies 3 levels of conversation. Level 1 is transactional. And this is where it's supporting an open platform for freely giving and receiving information. This level of conversation includes interaction dynamics such as asking and telling. Level 2 is about positional conversations, feeling the need to defend and sell our personal beliefs against the strong opinions of others. This level of conversation includes dynamics such as advocating and inquiring. Level 3, transformational conversations, also referred to in the methodology as co-creational conversations. This is the 3rd level of conversation. It includes interactive dynamics such as sharing and discovery, and takes place in situations where people are more trusting and open to being influenced. This is the level that we want to have most of our conversations in. But being able to recognise and master all 3 of the conversations also impacts our ability to lead and inspire others towards mutually beneficial outcomes. By effectively engaging with others and valuing their suggestions, we can open the conversations to new thinking that creates a platform for co-creation of ideas and solutions. So again, if we look at that from a safety perspective, if we can have people that are open to sharing new ideas and are trusting and also open to being influenced into changing the way that they do things, that can have a really positive impact on our safety culture and also on our safety performance as well. So conversational intelligence has many, many tools, and it's, to go through all of those, it would take a couple of days. There's leadership programs that we run now, programs that we run where, 3 and 4 days, and we still don't go through all of the 5 core skills of CIQ, because that's something that you can actually implement back into the workplace as soon as you finish this workshop today. So the 5 core skills of CIQ are listen to connect, ask questions for which we have no answer, prime for trust, sustain conversational ability, and double click to get inside of what others are actually seeing, feeling, and want to say. So when we talk about listening to connect, this is an essential overarching internal action that we practice in all movements of conversational intelligence. Listening to connect, not judge, confirm, or reject, is a way of listening to the other person with a focus on them, not you. It's bigger than listening to understand, which is more about listening to confirm what you know. Listening to connect is about focusing your attention on other people. What are they trying to say? What are they thinking? What are they hoping you will help them explore? connect to their world, and explore their world. The second core skill, the second core skill is about asking questions for which we have no answers. And this is a really interesting one because quite often we will ask questions because we know what we want the answer to be. So we'll tailor our questions so we get the answer that we want. So the essential of asking questions for which we have no answers is the external arching and overarching framework, again, guiding all of our CIQ practice. Like I said, too often we ask questions to guide people to where we want them to go. And that's something that is really prevalent, I guess, or comes up quite a lot if we're doing an incident investigation. We'll have in our mind what we believe has actually happened, and we'll actually tailor our questions around that and to try and get the answer that actually fits what our belief is of what caused the incident. So when we do that, though, it's felt by others as leading and can be interpreted as manipulation, putting people on guard, and it activates our distrust network. So again, when our distrust network's activated, it puts us in that threat state. The blood starts to run from our prefrontal cortex and starts to go through our limbs to prime us for that fight, flight, freeze response. And remember, when we're in that phase or that response mode, we actually can't think straight. So we're not going to get the answers from people that are actually will help us in the situation that we're actually in. When we ask questions for which we have no answers, we have a mindset, or in a mindset of discovery. And others feel this as inquisitive and curious. This puts people into a co-creating, trusting and receptive state of mind. Our goal is to help others with whom we interact to discover their own meaning and self-awareness. Therefore, asking questions for which we have no answers opens and expands the conversational space for a completely new reality to emerge for us and for the people that we're having the conversation with. So by using this conversational intelligence essential, it activates the process of co-creation between you and others who you're communicating with around discovery. And together we can create a space that activates new thought networks in the prefrontal cortex of both yourself and whomever you're communicating with. The next core skill of conversational intelligence is priming for trust. And this is like the foundation of the conversational intelligence house. Without actively priming for trust, no other essential or tool that we use will be effective, and we can't build a solid house. So it all begins with asking yourself questions to shift your awareness towards the trusting conversation. To help you prime for trust, reflect and co-create responses to the following questions. How can I create a safe environment? Can I be more transparent about the desired outcomes and shared threats that may stand in the way? What actions, thoughts, or words will enable the other person to shift from protect to partner? How can I establish rapport? How can I establish a power with others context? What actions, thoughts, or words will enable us to listen, to connect and relax judgment and ignite a sense of co-creation? What actions, thoughts, or words will bring a view of our realities? Will bridge between our realities. What can we say to reduce conflict and open a new view of what mutual success looks like? How can I approach the people or person I'm interacting with candor, care, and courage? Can we identify reality gaps and stay open to test assumptions? And can I or we stay in a shared and discover, listen to connect, and be open to change our mindset state? So the fourth core skill in conversational intelligence is about sustaining conversational agility. So if we think about priming for trust as being the foundation of conversational intelligence, conversational agility is the roof that sits over the house. The conversational agility is what we all aspire to activate and create mastery in our interaction dynamics. It's by using conversational intelligence, it's our mission to assist others in becoming conversationally agile. Without conversational agility, we cannot move into different types of conversations with ease and co-harmony. So when conflict is brewing, a pattern interrupting, using reframe, refocus, and redirect is a powerful way to build the conversational agility muscle. It enables people to open to new energy, insight, and outlook for wisdom and insight to emerge. Using your conversational intelligence skills, so these 5 core skills, you can use reframing, refocus, and redirecting, the 3 R's, as the way you refocus your conversation to elevate the communication abilities to everyone involved. So this can be used with the overarching frameworks of double clicking, which we'll talk about next, and also asking questions for which you have no answer. And it enables you to make stronger connections and experience different results. By mastering these skills, you're helping yourself to regulate your own neurochemistry and create a mind shift from your lower brain to your higher brain. When your company, team, or organization becomes adept at this, whole company mindset shifts. And the culture change people experience is profound. It starts with you and your one-on-one interactions. So if we can actually interact this or implement this into those daily conversations we have, you can see how it can be so beneficial to improving our safety performance. So the 5th core skill of conversational intelligence is what we call double clicking. The double clicking is the essential strategy.
Sorry, Deanne.
Double clicking is an effective way to ask questions for which we have no answers. Yep.
Have you turned off your screen?
Hello. No. Is it not showing?
No, it stopped showing.
Hang on a sec. Get out of the screen. Just bear with me a sec, everyone. I'll just have a look and see if I can. Okay, so I'm just restarting it again. Can you see it again now, Pip?
Yes, there we go. Thank you.
Okay, that's okay. All right. So double clicking, like I said, it's an effective way to ask questions for which we have no answers. It's a really excellent strategy to use with all of the CRQ tools around, but bearing in mind that even though you're just seeing a snapshot of it today, you can actually implement double clicking into the conversations you have. You can use it when you're doing incident investigations as well, because again, it's just about reinforcing and clarifying the information that you get from people. So as we double click, it reveals a deeper meaning that's held by ourselves and others. Through double clicking, we can better understand how we see the world and how others see the world. We gain clarity and understanding of what triggers us, but we also gain understanding of others' perspective, their deeply held beliefs and their point of view. By double clicking, it makes people double clicking enables people to make discoveries and personalize their own meanings. It also activates the process of discovering and therefore increases our conversational agility. So double clicking is the overarching strategy that frames our approach when using conversational intelligence through conversations. So this is probably the key of those 5 core skills that you can use in the workplace to improve your conversations. So some simple, sorry, that's moved too far. So some simple yet powerful examples of double clicking questions are why? Why, what does that mean? What else? And things like that. So it's about asking the why, the what else? So they say when we do incident investigations that we should really ask the question why 5 times. And this really supports that approach as well. Because if we ask someone, why did you do that? Or why did it happen? Quite often they'll just say whatever comes to their head to start with or their mind to start with. But when we keep asking, and why, or but why, what else? What did you mean by that? We start to dig deeper into the conversation, and that's what double clicking is all about. So double clicking was used originally by, pressing the computer mouse twice to open up a folder or document. But in conversations, it's a metaphor to explain. Clicking twice on words used in a conversation to open up the meaning others may hold inside. Meaning is stored in deeper structures in our brain. And as we double click, it reveals the deeper meanings that others hold. Through double clicking, we can better understand how others see the world and gain understanding of their perspective. And like I said before, their deeply held beliefs and their points of view. So if we think about it from a neuroscience perspective, our brains have capacity, meaning that there's limited amount of space for daily functioning. The bulk of our learnings are stored below the surface. This is healthy and prevents us from getting too overloaded. We literally cannot keep everything we see, experience, take in our working memory because it becomes overloaded. So a lot of that goes into our long-term memory, and it doesn't come up unless something actually triggers that as well. So that's where double clicking is really important, because again, we might say something that's at the front of our mind, and it's not till we ask that question again that it actually comes up. We go deeper into our brain and we draw on the memories that are actually stored in our long-term memory. So double clicking enables us to activate and explore the huge valuable insights, memories, and wisdom that we have available through conversations. Creating safe places for double clicking is really important because that enables us to become more conversationally intelligent. We elevate, share, and discover behaviors, and we most importantly activate oxytocin, which again is our feel-good hormone, our body's natural bonding and partnering hormone. And when we're in that state, we're in a reward state. So we're more engaged, we're more open to learning things, we're more open to other people's views and opinions, as opposed to if we're in a threat state. So that's where we want people to be, is always in that reward state. And I understand that having conversations about safety can be challenging. A lot of times it's because someone may have done something wrong, and that's why we're having that conversation. But as I said at the start of this presentation, using the principles of conversational intelligence, they say that even a bad conversation, if it's done in the right way, can actually have a good outcome and be a good conversation. And so instead of putting people into a threat state where they automatically feel threatened by you even approaching them, straight away you're putting them into that reward state. And once they're in that reward state, they're more open to actually listening to what you're saying and actually taking it on board as well. The asking questions for which you have no answers is absolutely critical from a safety perspective, because again, all too often we'll go into a situation, whether it's an incident investigation or whether it's just a safety interaction, a conversation with someone, and we will already have a preconceived idea in our mind about why they're doing it that way or what they're doing. One of the things our brain does, it's inherently lazy. And so when it's lazy, that's why we hardwire everything that we possibly can and create habits and shortcuts, because we don't want to waste our time, or we don't have that time and energy to actually take all the information in. So a lot of times people don't even realize what they're doing until someone says something to them. But if you say it to them in a way that puts them in a threat state, they're going to go straight in the defensive, and you're not going to get the outcome that you need or that you want from that situation. So by putting them into that reward state, or getting them into that reward state by using these simple tips or simple skills, can actually ensure a completely different outcome from that conversation. So listening to connect. Ask questions for which there are no answers. Prime for trust. Sustaining conversational agility and double clicking to get inside of what others are actually thinking, feeling, and wanting to say is again key to actually shifting our safety performance and key to shifting engagement that we have with people. So if we think about that in terms of what we can say or do, or words or phrases that shift us from distrust to trust, simple things like yes, but. When we say that, people only hear the but. So you might have said some really positive things before that, but as soon as you've got to that but, their brain automatically goes into that threat state. The amygdala in their brain starts to activate, and that starts to draw the blood from the prefrontal cortex and sends it to their limbs because they're deciding what to do, whether it's fight, flight, or freeze. So instead of saying yes, but, something as simple as yes, and tell me more about that, can shift people from distrust to trust. It can stop them from going into that threat state right from the start. Another one, why did you do it that way? Again, people hear the why. And even though you might say it in a way that, why did you do it that way? So it sounds inquisitive. People hear the why and they have a negative connotation with that. So again, help me to understand what led you to do it that way. Help me to understand, what you're thinking. Again, asking questions for which you have no answer. Whereas, why did you do it that way? If you ask that question, 9 times out of 10, you will already have an answer made up in your mind because, our brain is really good at filling in the gaps when we don't have information. Just do as you're told. Again, negative puts people into the threat state straight away. And again, often we see that in the safety world where people will ask, well, why do we have to do it this way? And it's just do what you're told. Just get the job done. But it puts people straight into that threat state. And they're more inclined not to do it that way and more inclined to make mistakes and go back to their old habits. Because again, when they're in that threat state, blood has run from their prefrontal cortex, gone to their limbs, and they can't actually think straight. So when they're in that state, they can't make a decision. They can't take instructions. They can't consider other options. So something simple like, what would you recommend, can actually flip that conversation completely. You don't need to know why. And this is a really interesting one. And I know certainly in my career, I've been told that a lot of times as well. Well, why are we doing this? Oh, you don't need to know why, just do it. But the way our brain works, we actually need to understand the why for it to make sense to us. And if we don't get the answer that we need, again, our brain will just discard it or it will go into that distrust defensive mode. So something as simple as, what information do you need to help you succeed at doing your job? So, if people are asking, why do we need to do that? Well, what information do you need to be able to do that? What can I give you to help you understand why we need to do it this way? So again, asking that question, asking for an answer asking the question for which you don't have the answer. You don't know what information someone needs because everyone needs different information to process it because our brains are hardwired completely differently. So no two brains are the same. So what you might give one person and that satisfies their need or their why, another person, it doesn't. So we need to find out what information they need or what help they need from us. You always mess up or you always make mistakes is another one that we hear. I'm not going to say quite often, but we do hear it in a workplace. And again, when people hear that, they go into that threat state. They feel that they're not valued, they're not good at their job, and they can become disheartened and disengaged. So the flip side of that is, let's talk about what's getting in your way. What's actually stopping you from doing the job the way we need it to be done, or what's happening, what's causing you to actually make the mistakes that you're making. And again, a lot of times people won't realize that they're making a mistake because they've hardwired that way of doing it into their brain. So it's not until someone actually says something that they realize that they potentially might be doing it the wrong way. So far, I haven't heard anything worthwhile. Again, that comes up sometimes in organizations as well, or in meetings when you're having a conversation with someone. And again, that puts people into that threat state and also makes people feel devalued. I haven't heard anything worthwhile. And that might just be, we don't think it is, but to other people, it might actually be worthwhile, because remember, our brains are hardwired completely differently. So a way to shift that conversation is, help me understand what is important about whatever it is. And again, you're asking that question to get that priming for trust, to get them to think about things, to get that sustainable conversational ability. And when you ask these questions, though, just as important as asking the questions is listening to connect. And sometimes we listen, but we don't connect. We listen, and before the person's even actually finished the conversation, we're actually thinking about the next thing. And so we haven't actually listened. And people pick up on that as well. So really key to conversational intelligence is about listening as well. Listen to connect. Think about the words that you're using. Think about the impact they can have on people's brain, and whether it can put them into a threat response or a reward response, because again, that's what we need to do. So what we need to do more of, instead of, or say less of, just take it at face value. Say more of, what assumptions do you hold about it? You know, it is what it is. Ignore them and they will go away. Too much conflict to address. We need to do less of telling what I know. We need to do less of telling people, well, this is how I've done it. Again, we might want to share that knowledge with people, but don't do it in a way where it's, well, this is how I do it, or this is the way you should do it because I do it this way. Do less of what we call sell and tell, or tell and sell, sorry. It's, telling and trying to sell it so they take on board what we do and how we do it. So we want to do more of discovering. We want to do more of listening. We want to create a curious and receptive culture. We want people to be able to speak to us, to tell us what their concerns are, to share their knowledge and ideas as well. And that's the whole aim of conversational intelligence. So that's just, I guess, a snapshot of obviously the 5 core skills of conversational intelligence. And conversational intelligence actually goes much, much deeper than this. And, those 5 core skills then branch into many other avenues as well. And like I said, to go through them all would take a couple of days to actually work through it. Training in the different methodology took 2 years. So there's a lot of different tools that you can use, and a lot of different aspects or elements that come off of these things. But they're the 5 core skills that you can actually use in any conversation you have in the workplace or at home. And you can actually start using those right after the workshop, because they're quite simple and easy to actually implement. Has anyone got any questions, or anyone want me to go into anything else or clarify anything that we've spoken about in today's session?
You can just raise your hand or post in the group chat if you have any questions, and we'll give you the mic and you can ask away. Deanne, I have a question about, I know a lot of organisations these days are remote, and most of the communication is done through email or instant messaging. Is there a way where we can, really bring these principles into our written conversations as well?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the, I guess, whilst email has so many benefits, one of the huge disadvantages with it is it takes that human side out of the conversations. And as human beings, we all like connection as well. But the reality of life is that because we do have remote workplaces, that a lot of times we do rely on email or instant messaging. And again, you can use the same principles, because in instant messaging, for example, quite often you're having a conversation with someone through that instant messenger. So again, think about the way that you actually frame your questions. You have to actually put a lot more thought into it when it is by email or when it is by instant messenger, because if you put the apostrophe in the wrong place, or if you put something in capitals, again, people can put people into a threat state, because they'll see that as you emphasizing something, even though that may not be your intention. So if you're doing it, you can absolutely use these principles in those communications, because it actually makes you think about the words that you use as well, and how you actually frame those words, and how you actually structure it. So you're not going, you're not coming across as being sort of that forceful or having your own view or opinion. So absolutely, the 5 skills in this that we've gone through, the 5 core skills, absolutely you can apply them just as you would in a normal conversation to when you're typing your emails, or if you're asking a person a question on instant messenger, or even on text messages. And again, the listening to connect, listen to their answers as well, or really listen to the question whilst you're not actually physically listening to them talk. Read it, absorb it, take it in before you actually respond. And then if they're asking for advice, or you're trying to share information with them, ask those questions that you have no answer for. Prime them for trust, and double click. If they come back, always the double clicking is really good as well, not just to clarify their views and opinions, but also to reinforce as well. So because people, the more that they hear things, will actually take it in more as well, and it'll actually sit and they'll retain that too.
Thank you, Deanne. There's a question from Paul that he asks, what's a good example of a health and safety question with no answer? How might you frame it?
So they're always challenging, but tell me what happened is a classic example. And quite often we'll ask that question, tell me what happened, especially if it's an incident investigation, tell me what happened. But then we'll already have that preconceived idea in our mind about what we think's happened. And that can actually then limit our next questions that we ask as well. So that's when it's really important if you use that double clicking as well, to start asking the why or how, those sort of questions as well. And just going back and trying to see if you can get more information out of people without actually giving them those questions. So it's a bit about using your open-ended questions. But again, it's, going back and actually exploring those as well, and don't just take that first question or first answer as being the answer, because guaranteed if you probe a little bit more and ask those questions in a way that you activate that reward circuitry in people's brains, they'll actually come up with more, a more comprehensive response as well. But yes, simple things like, tell me what happened, tell me more about that, help me understand, why we do it that way, those types of questions. There's actually some really good questions. I'm just trying to find another one of my resources I have here, which has some great transformational questions. And these are what we call level 3 transformational questions. And I'm happy to share these with anyone who wants them after the session as well, if you'd like them. But these are questions like, what did you hear? How did you feel? What are you thinking? Those are really, really basic questions that we all ask. But we don't realize that they're actually transformational questions. And if we keep asking those questions and probing into them, we'll actually get a lot more co-creative ideas and that from people as well. So there's a list of about 100, what have we got? About 183 of these transformational questions that are actually one of the tools from the Conversational Intelligence Toolkit. So I'm happy to share that with everyone, just the same as I'm happy to share the actual tool for the 5 core skills of conversational intelligence as well. So then you can actually, I know it's hard sometimes when you sit on a webinar to try and take notes or take everything in, because again, our brain just can't physically do it. So happy to share those with anyone that's on the call after the session as well.
Yeah, that would be great, Deanne, to get a hold of some of those questions. I know it's we have quite a problem here, probably everywhere, that the work is set by people who don't actually know how to do it. So if we could go into our workplaces with these, being able to double click into the why are you doing the work that way, tell me more about it, we'll be able to write much better policies and procedures based on what our staff actually need.
Absolutely. And that's one of the big things that I've found, that understanding the methodology has been really helpful for, not just around having those conversations. I certainly use it in coaching conversations with leaders and teaching them how to do safety interactions in an effective way. Having those conversations with workers as well, conducting incident investigations. But I actually use it as well when I'm developing policies and procedures for organisations too. because again, it's about, what is the information people actually need? What does the information end users need to be able to understand and do their job safely? So the principles of these, and again, there's lots of other tools as well that might be helpful in that regard as well. So I'll package some of those up too, if anyone would like those as well, around how can this framework really help you in understanding how to develop a really user-friendly policy or procedure that will help you get buy-in. Because as we know, I mean, no one reads policies and procedures, or very few people read policies and procedures. So if we can get something that people actually engage with and understand, and it has the information that they need to satisfy their why in their brain, then that can, again, shift cultures significantly.
Yeah. We've got a question from Matt Jones asking if people
better sleep.
with very low conversational IQ, can they be saved from themselves? Because I think before you said it was a learnable skill.
Yes, yeah, it's learnable, and that's the thing. And I have used this obviously in all layers of organisations as well, from factory floors right through to obviously to executive teams and boards. And the interesting thing is when you can teach anyone how to do this. They're starting to, in America, they're actually starting to teach kids about this in schools as well. So it's one of those frameworks that I think we'll see it develop and evolve a lot more. Even though Judith has passed away, her team has really, still committed to actually growing it. And they're still doing a lot of research around it as well. So certainly you can teach people that have lower communication or conversational skills as well how to do this. Introverts, it's really good for introverts as well, because quite often if you're having a conversation with an introvert and they're an extrovert, for example, and you're an extrovert, for example, they can actually feel quite threatened by that in itself. So again, by just asking those questions and the way that you ask them and double clicking, it shows them that you're interested, you're listening to them as well. So again, they start to feel comfortable with you, and when they do, they're more open to actually sharing their experiences or sharing their thoughts and views and opinions. And if they think that you're actually listening to them and you're actually taking it on board, that even goes even further, because one of the things that, quite often, that when we're great at asking questions, we think we're good listeners, but we're really not. So it's about understanding our ability to actually listen and really listen, and to connect with those people as well. But even just changing, one organisation I went to a couple of months ago, we actually, banned the word but from the workplace. So it's, for a week they had a competition actually to start it, because it was really interesting how many times people said but. And that, again, if you listen to it, or if you go through the conversational intelligence methodology, but is one of those trigger words. So by just removing that, everyone laughed, because they said it was a bit of fun to start with, because everyone, would catch one another out using the words but then when they removed, and I've just said it then, when they removed that from their conversation, they noticed a shift even in their conversations as well, between leaders, between colleagues, and everyone, because suddenly everyone was on that more positive. They weren't putting but in, they were asking like and or how or what do we do. Does that answer your question, Matt?
And Deanne, I have another question. Is there a test for CIQ? Like, what if you think you're really good at listening and in conversation and asking questions without answers? Is there a self-awareness tool to get a real estimate of where you might be at with this type of
Yes.
thing?
Look, there is actually a tool. It's quite a comprehensive tool that they use, and they mainly use it in or it's mainly used in one-on-one coaching type environments at this stage. But one of the things they're actually working on this year is building an online tool that anyone can actually use, so they can have a look and see just basically where they sit in those, the 5 core skills, and also around the 3 levels of conversation, so the transactional, the positional, and the transformational as well. Because often we think we're in a level 3 conversation, which is our transformational conversations, but really we're only level 1. So they are actually building an online tool that anyone will be able to access. But at the moment, the one that they've got is called a Catalyst tool, and it's quite a long tool. Gives you some really great insight into yourself and the way that you do actually engage in your conversations. But certainly, I wouldn't recommend it for everyone to do that.
Yeah, we've just got
Yeah.
a comment from Bill Nelson there in the chats. That following up after these conversations and doing what you say you're going to do helps to build that safe environment and to build trust within your environments. I think that's what he's saying.
Yeah, absolutely it does. And it's really interesting, even if we look at it not just from, I guess, a safety perspective, but just from a change perspective as well. One of the key things, if we're trying to implement a new policy, procedure, or process, it's a change management process in effect. And the research around change management obviously is 70% of initiatives fail, and one of the reasons that fails is because we don't close that loop out. So we don't go back to people with feedback on the feedback they've given us either. So actually listening, asking them, and then going back and telling them what you've considered and why, and what you haven't been able to implement and why, does actually build that trust really quickly. And it helps people to understand the why as well, because a lot of times we'll put something out for consultation, and then people will provide us with feedback, and then they don't hear anything more of it. And so for them, that's, and for us, we might think, oh, well, they don't need feedback. It was just suggestions that they've given. But for them, they've taken the time to give us feedback and share their views and opinions on how this might work better or whatever it is. And if we don't go back and tell them, what we've considered, why we've taken it on board, or why we haven't taken their feedback on board, they're not going to understand the why, and they're not going to engage with the process. So again, the way our brain works, it's really important that our feedback loops, so our communication and our feedback loops, are continually, we're continually checking in to make sure that they're spot on, and we are going back to people, because again, if we don't, people will become disengaged, and then it doesn't matter what questions we ask them. If they're disengaged, it takes a lot to rebuild that trust and to get them back into that, so we can actually have those transformational conversations with them.
Yeah, definitely. Is there any more questions? I think we've got time for a couple more, potentially. And if not, you're more than welcome to send questions through to either myself or Matt. So I'm pip@advancedsafety.co.nz, or Matt. Everyone should have his email address, which we can pass on to Deanne and get some feedback on that. Right. No more burning questions. That's fine. So Dan's going to send us through some more of those questions that we can use, transformational questions, and a little bit more information on the 5 skills that we need to develop. I've learned a huge amount today, Deanne. Thank you very much. Not just for my conversations with clients and colleagues and staff, but with my husband and my nephews. Imagine saying to a child, just do as you're told, but say, well, what would you recommend doing? Oh, it'd be so good. Life-changing, I think. Absolutely. And removing but from your vocabulary also. Yeah.
And that's the great thing with conversational intelligence. I think it makes sense. And when you start to use the tools, they're not just tools that you use in the workplace. You can actually use them anywhere. So at home, at schools, at sport, whatever it is, you can actually use them. And it is just about, the way you frame your conversation and that reframing. So it's certainly, it's a great methodology. I actually love it. And I think because it's tied to neuroscience as well, and really considers the way people think and respond, and the actions and that they do, it helps us understand the responses people have when we ask them specific questions as well. So usually if you start to become a lot more aware of that too, you can actually see if a question you've asked has actually been, not framed the way that you intended either, because if you've asked it in the right way or in the way using the methodology, certainly you'll get a different response to if you ask it in the way, if you get that sort of, standoff one answer response or that closed response. Have a think about how you've asked the question and reframe it and ask the question again. But it's certainly a tool that you can use anywhere, not just to work. It's not just applicable to health and safety either. You can use it in any part of an organisation, whether it's, HR, employee engagement, absolutely anything. If you're engaging with stakeholders, customers, clients, you can use it for that as well. Because again, often if we're working in consulting, one of the things that we'll do is, when you're trying to explore what the person's actual needs are, it's really challenging sometimes because they'll think they know what they want, but they don't really know what they want. So if you start asking some of these questions in a certain way and using this framework, you'll actually get a lot more information and in-depth information from them that will help you or enable you to be able to, respond to them better and provide them with a better service as well. So don't just think about it in terms of your safety conversations with your colleagues or your manager. Think about it in terms of any conversation you have, in life in general, and certainly you can apply those.
Awesome. Cool. I'm just going to take back the host, Deanne. And I know a few people have popped off already to head back to work.
Fine. Do I need to do anything? No.
No, we're good, I think. So thank you, everyone, for joining in with us today, and thank you for your questions and your participation. I'd just like to remind you, if you haven't already joined NZHSP on the Facebook group, make sure you do that. And if you haven't signed up for the conference, go to nzhsp.co.nz and book now. It's going to be a great day. We've got our second keynote speaker announcement coming by the end of next week, and there will be another big announcement at the end of that conference. So come along to that. It's online, it's free, we just require your time. And the aim is that we are building the capability of the health and safety professionals in New Zealand. So once again, Deanne, thank you so much for your time with us today. I know I've learned a heap, and I'm sure everyone else has some stuff that they can walk away with too. Really appreciate it. I'm sure if we were in person, people would be clapping for you right now.
No, that's fine. It's always hard when you do it on webinars because not having that contact, but hopefully, and I know it is hard for everyone to stay engaged when we're all busy with other things too, but hopefully you got something out of the session that you can use when you go out into the workplace as well. So, and like I said, feel free, if anyone would like any tools or has any more questions or thinks of anything, either reach out to Pip or Matt, or you can reach out to myself as well. That's absolutely fine. So happy to share anything with anyone that might help you.
Awesome. All right. Well, thanks everyone. I think we'll bring this webinar to a close. And thank you for coming, and hopefully we'll see you all at the conference on November the 5th.
Great. Thanks, Pip. Thanks, everyone.